All right, so what I want to do today with Angela's Ashes is going to ask you questions. And I told you that I would, I didn't want to give you a lot of prep work, though I did give you a little history to read, so you got a little bit of a background. But I'd like you to, one of the problems with this book is we've taught it to everybody in the school in years past. We chose it for this reason. Obviously our country has, immigrants from around the world coming here. And our community has a pretty good influx of people from, we have a group from Nepal. We have an African community that comes from a few different countries in Africa, mainly like Ghana, Nigeria, and a couple of the other countries in that area. And then we have a population that come up from Latin American countries. So we knew that as a school, so we thought, how do we kind of talk about that subject matter? And we opted for this book because it was kind of neutral, if you will. There are books about Africans immigrating to America, Asians immigrating to America, people from Latin American countries immigrating to America. There's all kinds of books. But it's also an American tradition and history. And so the teachers decided, let's take Angela's Ashes, let's do Irish immigration, because no one talks about Irish immigration anymore, because the Irish are here and have blended in, and they're even your teachers today, right? They're descendants, okay? You see what I mean? So it's not a new thing. And the idea was if we could show that story in the past, we could learn from the past, but it would also segue us into conversations about the now, right? And the idea with a story like this is to make you a little bit more aware and more empathetic to the struggles of people coming from around the world. Even the ones that come here, certain people come to this country, they're actually highly educated, and they're coming here for a far better opportunity in the sense of job. They can make this much where they are as a doctor, or they can make this much as a doctor and live in a culture that they are choosing to, right? They're not coming here trying to escape, so to speak. They're coming here to for financial benefit and better security and education for their children, so to speak. The Irish were coming here as escape. Ireland was the worst place on earth to be, and America was the place to be. So here they come, right? So that's the idea behind the book. And in years past, when we did the whole book, we did all kinds of stuff on Irish history, the religious aspects, so on and so forth. And I could spend a quarter on this book. Right? I know too much about the topic. I've read the book several times, but I also studied the Civil War in college. I studied the 20th century authors, James Joyce and those guys, the Revolution. So I can get off and go on and on and on. So I decided to experiment. I haven't done the book in a few years. I decided to tell you nothing and have you read just one chapter and then ask away. And then those of you who are interested can certainly, as I said, keep the book and you can read the rest of it, or you can lovingly give it back tomorrow and be done with the Irish, okay? And so I'm trying a little bit different, all right? So with that, and I open it up and I ask you guys, is anybody dying to ask their question before I start calling on you individually and randomly? Yes, go ahead, Sean.
Why are they singing so much?
Why do they sing so much? See, that's why I wanted you guys to ask questions, all right? Well, besides the fact that the Irish and their descendants are the better looking people on earth, as we already know, right? They are very musical, okay? And the reason why it's a great question is this. Generally, the less affluence that people have, the more musical they seem to be, right? So, at least in America, I should say that. The Irish are very musical. If you go to Ireland, everybody's in a dang band. Everybody's in a band. And they, is he outside in the hallway? Mr. Jacobs?
I noticed you were sitting down. Has it been a long day for you?
If you don't mind, Mr. Jacobs, let's come on in here and say hi to Mr. Jacobs, okay? He's not doing a dang thing like he's supposed to. Yeah, all right?
All right.
Tell your parents he has no business being here at school. All right.
I'm concerned about educating the whole child. I'm not sure you can reach them from a channel.
Yeah, well, I'm getting the whole child on quarantine right now. You're gonna lose this argument today, sir. You lost it
Good
today.
on you. Good on you.
But
Well,
every
clap
other
for
day
this
he
too.
seems to get me. Thank you. Thank you.
I noticed it was lagging a little bit. I thought you need to liven it up. That
Thank
whole conversation about the Irish. Who cares?
I do believe that's some of your ancestry too, though. All right, so the Irish extremely musical because they got nothing. Oddly enough, if you ever have any experience with American Civil War music, almost probably a good half of the American Civil War music is Irish music with American lyrics put on top of it. Okay? And as you know, like even our own national anthem, you may or may not know this, is a British pub tune with the words changed. Did you know that? Yeah, that's how he could write it so easily one bright morning. He just had that little tune in his head. And you'd be surprised how easy it is to change the lyrics of a song that already has a tune. It's not hard. The Irish fought in our Civil War in droves. They came here, they were looking for 3 hots and a cot, and the Union Army was happy to give that to them along with a musket. If they landed in the South, they ended up fighting for the Confederacy. They didn't care about slavery or anything else. They wanted to eat something other than potatoes. So the Irish actually give us a large swath of American music. It's country music. Anything to do with country music is almost all descended from Irish folk music. That's bluegrass and any kind of folk music to begin with, right? All that stuff that comes out of the Appalachian Mountains is Irish. Does anybody know what group gives us most of the other music? They give us rock and roll, they give us R&B, they give us jazz, blues, rap. The African Americans in America. So the English give us nothing when it comes to music, right? So they're not, but a lot of times it has to do with strife turns people to music. The best British music comes to America. It's called the British Invasion. It comes post-World War II. When their empire was descending into nothingness and they were suffering major economic problems, some of the great bands of Britain, of England come out. Your Pink Floyds, your Led Zeppelins, the British Invasion, right? But when they were ruling the world, they weren't singing too often. That's all I'm saying. So, awesome question. And it makes them happy. Good, good. Who else has one? All right, coming after you then. Jessica, give me a question.
So my question is, why was him being Catholic a contribute to all of the troubles that he had to go through?
Who are we talking about?
We're
Talking about Frankie the boy?
Mhm.
Say it again.
Him being Catholic and stuff.
Oh, why was being Catholic a problem? Okay, so in the 1800s, England's founded by, the American colony is founded by basically the English. They're Protestant. And Scots come in, they're Protestant. Some of the Germans that were coming in early on, Protestant. The Irish come in, and the Irish retain the religion of Catholicism. Okay? So when we take that on, if you're looking at a map of Ireland there, and if you're at home, you can look up one. England converts to Anglicanism. They make the Church of England, basically, after Lutheranism and the Protestant Reformation. That's in the mid-1500s. Well, remember we talked about how in the 1600s, they started killing one another. Christians started killing one another. Catholics versus the Protestants. Just terrible slaughter. It's why the founding principle in this country is freedom of religion. It's not because we wanted everybody to be religious. That's okay if we are, right? It was they're rebelling against the idea that in Europe they were killing one another over their religion. Okay, so the English became Protestant, right? The Irish stuck to Catholicism. The Scots after all the killing, basically said, we're coming up with our own. That's basically Presbyterian and Calvinism and some others. The Irish stayed Catholic to oppose the English, and the English were vicious to them for it. That's why when the famine went on, the English did not lift too much of a hand to help them. And so they began coming to America in droves. And any time in a country, anytime you have a large segment of population come from abroad to a country, people get afraid of them, right? So it's one thing if you get, say, 10 immigrants from Lithuania, right? But all of a sudden, if you've got 500 families show up from Lithuania in your community, then you're worried. The Lithuanians are taking over. They're going to ruin the country, right? And that's the fear. And so there were so many Irish Catholics coming in. The fear was that they were going to greatly change the language. The Irish were poor. They had no assets. Their loyalty was to the Catholic Church and the Pope before country. And so the fear was that they would bring that religious kind of warfare to America. And they fought religious wars in the British Isles over Catholicism and that. And that was the fear. And there were so many of them that scared them. And so the Catholics, the amount of Catholics that came here in the 1800s, the fear was that there would end up being more Catholics in America than Protestants. Okay, that was the fear. And that when that happened, the country would be ruined. Okay, well, there are more Catholics in the country than Protestants. And again, as we joked about earlier, about how the only time America was ever any good is when it was the English in Jamestown, and ever since then, immigration's ruined it, right? We've had that been silly about that. And that's kind of there's still that fear today. But not afraid of Catholics coming here. If you remember, right, well, you wouldn't, you're too young, all of you. Post 9/11, the fear was too many Muslims coming here, right? And that's kind of gone away. But again, it's anytime you have a huge influx of any one group, it intimidates and scares people, all right? And of course, whether you know it or not, well, you probably don't know it because it wasn't made a big deal, but President-elect Joe Biden is also Catholic. He's the second Catholic president. JFK was the first one. It was a big to-do when JFK was elected. Nobody's talking about the religion today, because it's not a problem. It's not perceived as an issue. Instead, what we're talking about is Kamala Harris being first woman in the White House and of a racially diverse background, child of two different immigrants from two different countries. I mean, that's an interesting story. That is the story of America. Cribbie Core would be like, hey, all right, So, excellent question. Now in Ireland, it's a problem too. The English controlled all of Ireland through two cities, basically, Dublin and Belfast. And basically the English told them, if you want a job, you have to be Protestant to work here. If you decide to remain Catholic, you have no job. So a lot of people changed religions. And those who changed got the jobs for the English and worked for the English. They were sellouts. Those who didn't, okay, Nolan, you with me over there? Those who didn't basically faced starvation during the famine, okay? When the Irish gained control of their country in the 1920s and got home rule, they voted, and the people in Northern Ireland decided to stay with Britain because there are more Protestants in Northern Ireland than there are Catholics. That immediately started the Irish Civil War. That's what Malachy fought in. Malachy, the father, is from Northern Ireland. He's actually raised a Protestant. Angela's a Catholic. To us today, we're like, why does that matter? In our country, it doesn't. But it's like watching a story where a black person and a white person have a relationship, a loving relationship, marriage or something, and you're talking about, and it's placed in the 60s, right? Or the 50s or something like that. You got to have all that historical context. But that's why there's so much about religion. It would be kind of out of place today. It's an excellent question. Cammie, you had a hand?
Why did they not just lie and say that they had changed their religion? Why would you actually go? I mean, maybe I'm an idiot for asking.
Well, no, you're not actually an idiot, okay? So, I don't know how much you guys are well acquainted with, the history of the church. As a Catholic man, I grew up going to Catholic schools. We always learned about the martyrs and the saints, right? Or where they say, renounce your religion or you'll be burnt at the stake. And, Saint so-and-so was like pouring gasoline on himself, light me up, because I'm not going to betray my religion. Not in this country, right? Americans, I don't know how many Americans, if you polled them, would you burn at the stake for your religion? I don't know how many you're going to get, a yes. And you can even ask them, are you religious? Yes. Would you face unspeakable torments and torture, for your religion? I'm a no, right? That's a no. I'm not having, you want me to convert? What do you want me to convert to? Let's do it. I don't want to, pain's not my thing, okay? Now, Americans, I've never really heard too many Americans talking about dying for religion. Other parts of the world will, right? Other parts of the world will die for religion. What's the one quality that we Americans don't have any problem going off and dying for? Not religion, though. Freedom, right? Liberty. Protecting that. Like, people, oftentimes Americans would rather be dead than lose their freedoms. They don't want that. So so when you ask a question, completely legitimate. Because you go to other parts of the world and say, like, you go to a place like Saudi Arabia, they're not talking about fighting for liberty and freedom, right? It's a very religious-centric, Islamo-centric nation. So everything's centered around religion. Our culture, everything's kind of centered around freedom and liberty. So to us, it's silly, right? Like, the reason why, that's why he can't get a job. Malachi has a hard time getting a job because he is Protestant from Northern Ireland. And that's what the sisters are like saying, that's what's wrong with him. He comes with that funny accent. Everybody knows he's from up north. Picture being from Georgia and you can't hide your accent and you're trying to get a job up here and nobody wants to hire any Southerners, It's that kind of thing, right? It's a great question, not a silly question. Give me another one, I'm going to call you. Yes?
At the
Samuel.
end of chapter 1, when they go back to Ireland, did they leave the dad behind?
No, he goes with them. When they go back, if you decide to keep the book and read on, they end up going to the father's house. They tell him flat out, you can't stay here. We can't take care of you and all your kids. And they really don't like the kids because the kids are Americans, right? They're Yankees, little Yankees. They're always called Yankees. They make fun of them because of their accent. So they're uneducated New York, Brooklyn accents going back to Ireland. They all know who they are, And they end up going to Angela's family, and they don't like him at all. You got to remember, and that's a great question. Got to remember why they got married. They got married because they were drunk at a party, and they did what you guys all learn in health you're not supposed to do randomly with people, right? And she ends up pregnant because there is no birth control, there is none of that stuff. And what are they forced to do immediately? To get married. And then what do you got 9 months later? A couple more kids. 9 months after that, some more kids. Okay? All right? So, good question. Yes, Michael.
Why do they keep having kids?
Why'd they keep having kids?
Because there was no.
It's a great, right? You can't feed them. Why on earth would you have another one? Couple things. One, birth control is limited in the 30s. The birth control that changes the world for women does not come out till 1957. It's the birth control pill. Okay? The pill. That is the most revolutionary thing in women's rights because it allowed women to have children when they wanted. Okay? In marriage, especially back then, especially in a religious marriage, especially in Catholicism, right? Women did not have much control over their own body, okay? So there was no really stopping having kids, If the man was desirous, and so you can ask, well, why would the woman just not say no? They just weren't brought up that way. You know what I mean? You're married. that's what the wife does, and it's completely anathema to us. It's completely antithetical to the way we believe, you know? I mean, the marriage is a marriage forced, right? It's definitely not happy. Right? He didn't want to get married. He got marched down. I mean, they drug him down the aisle, right? She's not happy. He's an alcoholic. These poor kids just keep popping out. These poor children are brought into the world. It's not their fault, right? The poor baby doesn't even make it out of the crib before she dies, right? So you'll see it in the world today. So I saw a story on NPR. It was a refugee camp. I think the refugees were from Sudan. Believe they were living in Kenya. And they were interviewing a woman, and she said just how hard it is to be a refugee here. And I think she said she had 13 kids. It was a tremendously high number. She had lived, all of those kids have been born in the refugee camp. So, you know, the natural question, if you're a refugee in another country living in a camp, why would you have that many kids? Well, it had to do with religion. She, I believe she was in an Islamic marriage. The husband was going out looking for work or whatever, but, you know, their strict adherence to Islam was you have children. And that, you know, God or Allah would provide, you know, and that's why in the 1800s in our own country, you had these huge families, and you don't really have those huge families anymore because women have the power to control how many kids they have and the means to it. So, but it's a perfectly legitimate question. I mean, I wouldn't want to have more children with somebody who's not taking care of them, but yeah, excellent. Give me another one. Savannah, what do you got there?
I said, pretty much like, why did Frank's dad like choose alcohol over like his family?
Yeah, now, I believe even the Italian grocer even mentions, right, that he's got the Irish disease. Alcoholism in Ireland is bad. It was bad, it was very bad then. It's still a problem today. Every time I've been to Ireland, it's usually like, you know, we have those signs about, you know, like this county hates heroin. Remember the heroin epidemic, and we still have the heroin problem. But I mean, like, that whole kind of community, we got to do something about the heroin problem. Well, it's a little bit like that with the alcohol there. At least it's been a while since I've been there. It's been 20 years. But it is an issue. And again, I think the Irish were so destitute. Food was hard to come by, alcohol was not. And it becomes ingrained in the culture. And some guys can handle it, and some guys cannot, you know. We see it today in the Native American culture. Many Native American reservations, alcohol is illegal because Native Americans cannot handle it. Most Native American tribes cannot handle it. And it has to do with the fact that Europeans can handle their alcohol, right? They say that proudly, but it has to do more, I think I read this in National Geographic, with genetics. They drank alcohol so long, for so many hundreds of years, because it was the only thing safe. They had developed genetically a type of resistance to it, right? Native Americans never had that. And so when it was brought to them in the 1800s and 1700s, it did terrible things to them, you know? And addiction was awful. They couldn't control the amount of it. I mean, it just devastated them. Eskimo communities in Alaska, the Inuit and all that, they have the same problem. It is bad for them. So the Irish have it that way. We got, what do we got here? One more question. Yes, Colin.
Nothing was expected. Why did Angela's cousins criticize her for having children?
Well, so why does, if children were a great thing, why does Angela, I'm repeating the question here, why does the sisters get on her? Because she got married to a Protestant, right? She got married outside the Catholic Church. She got pregnant outside of marriage. She married the wrong guy, right? All those things. So she's a disgrace, but in that kind of world, they felt the need to clean up the family, right? That's why they cart them up and send them back to Ireland. So even though she's disgraced the family, When you get home, if you keep reading, when you get back to Ireland, you realize you didn't come from opulence and rich and wealth in Ireland. They're poor over there too. Okay, great question. All right, let's call that a day. All right.